This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast presented by Medi-Share. Together, we'll unpack fantasy, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson with Harrison Zuckerberg, and we are your fantasy coaches here to encourage you and help you win while also finding meaning and purpose throughout the fantasy season. We won't always be right, but we hope we'll be convincing. We are part of the Unpacking It Podcast Network, and I'm coming to you from the Unpacking It Ministries studio here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And be sure to check out our website, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. On the website, you'll find information about becoming an individual member. You'll get access to all of our content throughout the season, as well as throughout the season. And also, if you'd like to use our content within your church to start a church league, a fantasy league, and be able to meet on a regular basis to be able to talk fantasy, faith, and life together, we've got all of that available to you on our website. We have a membership cost for that as well. We also have a lot of free content on our website that you can enjoy, and we hope that you'll get behind this ministry and support us one way or another as we take you from the draft all the way through the end of the season, providing fantasy advice, but more importantly, taking a look at fantasy concepts, relating them to the Bible, relating them to our own lives. And we will do that on the show today during our breakout segment. And so this week's breakout topic is about reluctance. And you know those players during the draft that you reluctantly draft. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to give you some of those players that are on the list for us this season, and we'll relate that to the Bible and our own lives. We are brought to you by Medi-Share. If you're looking for an affordable, reliable healthcare option that you can trust, check out Medi-Share today. Medishare.com/unpacking it has all the information you need, and you can find out how you can save money on your healthcare costs. And the great part is members on average save 50% or more on their healthcare costs. And so again, Medishare.com/unpacking it. My family, we've been a member for over 6 years. So very thankful for Medi-Share personally, but then also to be able to partner with them on the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast and within Unpacking It Ministries. All right. So also on the show today, we're going to give you a couple names from each of these categories, players that we want to draft no matter what. We want to go get them, even if we have to draft them maybe a little bit earlier than normal. We want to draft them. Then there's players that under no circumstance, I'm not drafting them. And then we've also got our category players that at the right cost, right price, right draft choice, I'll take them. Only if they slip, only in the right circumstance. And so we'll share some of those today. And we are going to begin, though, by taking a look at some of the latest training camp storylines, some of the reports that we as fantasy owners have to be very careful to not get caught up in the information, but also to follow the information, injuries, and some of the reports are genuine information. But let's say hello to Harrison Zuckerberg, my co-host here on the show. And Harrison, why don't you give us a little insight on really what goes on at training camps before we jump in on some of these topics?
How you doing, Bryce? So around this time, you'll see a lot of posts on social media and all over the internet of, oh, rookie catches 70-yard touchdown pass, or Tyreek Hill deep bomb from Tua. Can't question Tua's arm strength anymore. And unfortunately, you can't really believe a lot of that as much as we would like to. I spent time working for an NFL team during their training camp last season, and I can't even tell you the number of times where the fans are out there, it's hot, at the end of practice, the coaches say, okay, let the rookie receiver, run whatever route he wants to deep down the field and score a 60-yard touchdown just to get the fans excited. Like, we know the defense is going to be great. Just put on a show so the fans can get excited about the new players on the team and think the offense is going to be great headed into the season. So the one that sticks out to me is a lot of people are making a big deal of Chris Olave's 60-yard touchdown that he had this week with Jameis Winston. Now, if you watch that play, no one was within 30 yards of Chris Olave down the field. He kind of just ran straight and was open in the end zone. So, unfortunately, we can't buy too much into that, saying that Chris Olave is now going to be beating everyone for touchdowns when the regular season actually comes. What you can pay attention to, though, is, battles of who's getting playing time over other guys. Now, if a rookie is starting with the ones, or, maybe a veteran is playing a different role in the offense than normal, that's something you can pay attention to, because those are actual, plays and formations that they are going to be practicing for the regular season. But anytime you see a huge play that just seems a little bit too good to be true, it probably is. And they're just putting on a show so, the social media team can have something to post.
Absolutely. So that's our responsibility as for us as fantasy coaches here on this podcast to help you as a fantasy owner kind of wade through some of the nonsense, but then also for you as an owner, you got to keep up with this news throughout the week. And you got to, if you see some of the videos, to Harrison's point, all right, where was the defense? Was it at the end of practice? And so we've got to, continue to be just wise about how we understand the information that is shared out there. And so, all right, so let's go through a couple of kind of the stories from the last week or so. And I was intrigued by this one in Dallas. We're trying to figure out, all right, what's really going to happen with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. We saw Tony Pollard really emerge toward the end of last year, and you look at how efficient he is, and he's really productive. And the eye test, I think Cowboys fans are all thinking, man, this guy's faster. He burst through the hole better than Zeke. But who's got all the money? Zeke. And so we heard Jerry Jones come out within the last week and, Zeke's our guy, and was really speaking highly of him. And so let's play a little game here, Harrison, as we get going. When we hear this news, does it confirm what you already believed? Does it confuse what you were thinking? And does some of the news that we'll go through, does it cause you to consider maybe a different player that you weren't previously considering? And so with the hype surrounding Ezekiel Elliott, it seems like he's rising draft boards. And I think a lot of that has to do with Jerry Jones and maybe even Mike McCarthy to a certain extent, hyping Zeke up. Where do you come out on this one in particular?
Yeah, so we'll talk about Zeke more in depth a little bit later, but this just confirms for me that Zeke is, reluctantly, like we're going to talk about later, going to have a pretty solid fantasy season again. I don't think Tony Pollard is going to be a huge threat. They're not paying Zeke to sit on the bench. And a lot of the talk about Tony Pollard also working as a wide receiver within training camp, while that's really exciting for his fantasy value, that also telling you, well, if he's playing a lot of wide receiver, he's not going to be playing over Zeke at running back. Zeke's definitely the main running back there. So that just confirms that, both these guys will be good still, but Zeke is the main back in Dallas.
So for me, this confirms I want Tony Pollard. And that means that I can get Tony Pollard at a discount because everybody is thinking about Zeke. And exactly to what you just said, that means Pollard's going to drop in draft boards. And I like still the possibility that if he does get that chance, let's say there's a Zeke injury. Let's say Zeke does get off to a slow start, which we've seen, that Pollard, I can get him at a discount. And even if he doesn't pan out, I can get him later. I'm good to go. So that confirms my draft strategy with Pollard. All right. How about this? I'm a Panthers guy. So Baker Mayfield, he gets off to kind of a slow start in training camp. Well, then all of it, threw an interception. Then all of a sudden he comes back the other day, throws 3 touchdowns to DJ Moore. So does this confirm, confuse, or give you some consideration?
This gives me a little bit of consideration with Baker Mayfield because, we have to take everything, like I said before, that happens in these practices with a grain of salt and look at the situation here. The first day, if he throws 2 interceptions, this is his first time being exposed to the playbook and really understanding what's going on the field. So we can't look at that, with too much caution, being like, oh, he's going to throw a ton of interceptions this season. And then the 3 touchdowns to DJ Moore, that's not also saying that DJ Moore is going to have 3 touchdowns every single game. They're practicing plays. DJ Moore is obviously going to be a focal point in that offense. So overall, I think Baker will be an improvement at quarterback. It's hard not to be an improvement over Sam Darnold. It'd be really saying something if you weren't an improvement over Sam Darnold. But I think, we should just look to see how he's performing a little bit later once he gets more acclimated to the offense and overall who's featured weapons-wise for Carolina.
Yeah, I'm not interested. I like Baker for the Panthers. I think the Panthers are going to be much better this year. And I said on the Unpacking It podcast, I actually think the Panthers are going to win the division, as crazy as that sounds. But I'm not interested in Baker as a fantasy guy. But I am targeting DJ Moore. I want DJ Moore, especially if I can get him like as the 13th, 14th wide receiver off the board, somewhere in that range. I'm loving life. I'm feeling good about that. I like the value there. All right, let's get to another report. This one in coming out of LA. Sarah Barshop from ESPN talking about Matthew Stafford has good chemistry with his new receiver, Allen Robinson, specifically on one play when Stafford threw to Robinson in between two defenders in the back of the end zone. So you're a Bears fan. You're a little burned by Allen Robinson, but I'm in on the Allen Robinson on the bandwagon. I want him in drafts. I like him going, just a touch later. I'm afraid he's going to get too much hype. But I like him as a bounce back candidate and emerging as a key weapon in a high powered offense in LA.
I completely agree. I think he's going to be a great number two there. Robert Woods was, a fringe wide receiver one before he got injured last year, even with Cooper Kupp's amazing season that he was having. I think Allen Robinson's a more talented player than Robert Woods and fits, the outside boundary receiver role a little bit better than Woods did in that offense. And that highlight touchdown play that he had, that was not one where the defense was letting him have it. He was fighting for that ball till the very end. So that just confirms that he's still got the juice. He's still got that catch strength. And he can make some great contested catches in the red zone for the Rams this year.
All right. So I'm again that sort of confirms my belief in Allen Robinson. So I'm in on him. All right, we'll do one more, and this comes out of Philly. Many reporters thought that earlier last week Kenneth Gainwell appeared to be running with the first team running backs, and Miles Sanders was running with the twos. But then Nick Sirianni came out, said Miles is our guy. It just so happens to be the way the numbers work, but Miles was in with the ones as well. There's no secret. Miles is our guy, and we'd like to rotate our backs. So a couple episodes ago, I'm in on the Eagles this year. My neighbor, who's a loyal listener of this show, big Eagles fan, and so he was excited about me being in on the Eagles. But he was buying into this hype. He heard the story. Oh, what about Miles Sanders? Is Gainwell the guy? This also confirms for me that I want the Eagles players. I want this high-powered offense. It might be Sanders. It might be Gainwell. If fantasy owners hear this news and Sanders drops a little bit and I can get him at a discount, I'm loving life. If I can grab Gainwell in one of the later rounds, I'll try to scoop him up. I don't usually like to have the same running backs from the same team, but I'm good with either one of them. So does this confirm, confuse, or give you a little consideration?
So this all three, honestly, because
the Eagles.
Yeah. The Eagles have so many weapons. We really don't know who's going to end up on top. And maybe no one ends up on top and everyone splits time. But it's just such a weird statement because he says, it's no secret. Miles is our guy. We like to rotate our backs. Well, if you're rotating your backs, then he's clearly not your only guy that you're going to use. And Kenneth Gainwell, even though he didn't get a ton of touches last year, was one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL, not just rookies, like total running backs in the NFL with the touches that he got last season. So it would be kind of crazy for them not to give him more opportunities this year. Miles Sanders has been really inconsistent, has dealt with a lot of injuries during his career. Miles may be the guy to start out the season, but I would not be surprised if Gainwell was, 1B to Sanders' 1A or even overtakes him by the end of the year.
Yeah, I like the value of Sanders, that because last year he was somewhat of a disappointment, but he still produced, and this team still wants to run the ball, and that's going to be their bread and butter. Now they've added AJ Brown, which just raises the whole offense. So when they do throw, they've got a legit weapon that they can count on, and so that just makes Hurts even more of a threat, and I think that causes defenses to pay more attention to the wide receivers, whereas last year it was a little bit inconsistent. I still like Devontae Smith as well. So, all right, there you go. There's some training camp kind of hype and news, and we'd love to know your thoughts as a listener. What news is catching your eye? Where are you confused by the news? Let us know. You can email me info@fantasyfootballfellowship.com. All right. So we'll talk to Harrison in a moment because we're going to hear what players he's reluctant to draft this year. But we're going to jump into the breakout topic for this week's show, and basically during this segment, we take a fantasy concept related to the Bible, related to our own lives, and we've designed these topics for you and your league to discuss these topics in or during league meetings throughout the season. And so you can get access to the breakout topic, questions, a prayer, challenge for the week, and we've set you up well. And so you can become a member for $10 on fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Your church can also become a member. So check out that information, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. But more importantly than becoming a member, what we want to do here at Fantasy Football Fellowship is point one another to Jesus. And we want to grow in our faith, and we want to experience genuine fellowship. That's the hope and goal for what we're trying to do. But let's take a look at this week's topic about reluctancy. And every year there are guys that we know are going to produce. And you know that this guy on the draft board is the right person to draft because they're consistent, they're reliable, but maybe they've been there a while. Like maybe they're getting a little, maybe they're more of a veteran. They're an older player. Maybe they've been on the same team for a long time, and so you just find yourself a little hesitant or reluctant to draft them. Think about Melvin Gordon last year. A lot of people were kind of reluctant. I know Harrison was reluctant to draft him last year, but then Melvin Gordon was very solid and really outproduced where he was drafted. And so we end up, selecting those types of guys, even though it isn't a player that we're as excited about. Maybe it's because the fantasy community hasn't been hyping them up, or they aren't the new player or the high ceiling guy, and they're just steady. They've always delivered. They've just been that consistent player year in, year out. But if you're in a in-person draft, when you select that guy, you're just going to get crickets, right? You like the feeling during a live draft when you draft the sleeper or the hot name, and it's like, oh no, everybody's like, oh, I wanted that guy. But when you draft a consistent guy, everybody's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, who cares? It's that kind of attitude. And so it's just kind of interesting that this mentality sort of infiltrates our decision making during draft day, where we just become a little reluctant and hesitant. And so on the flip side, though, isn't this the kind of guy we should be passionate about? Like, instead, we're getting so enticed by the rookie running back who hasn't done anything. We're enthralled with the player that everyone is talking about that has yet to actually produce anything. And even though, deep down we know we can't count on the rookies or the guy that's supposed to take the next big step. Everybody's still waiting for Mike Gesicki to really take that big step. We've been talking about him for 6 years. I'll talk about him later. But what if we actually drafted players who have shown the most reliability, instead of considering them boring, or instead of reluctantly drafting them, that we embrace it and we get excited? Yeah, I'm taking the reliable guy. I'm taking the guy that I can count on. Let's go. And being bold and enthusiastic about those types of guys. And so what does this have to do with our own lives? Well, I believe that oftentimes, when how we view doing the right thing and making wise choices sometimes can be viewed as boring. And maybe we still reluctantly do what we're supposed to do, but we sort of reluctantly do it. Yeah, Bryce, he's steady, he's consistent, and we almost view that as a bad thing. But it's like, wait, what? Why is that a bad thing? And then when it comes to following Jesus, the question becomes, are we truly passionate about living our lives with him and for him? Or are we just going through the motions and maybe reluctantly going to church, reluctantly reading the Bible? And so, where has our enthusiasm gone? Shouldn't we be excited to follow Jesus, who has always been faithful, is always reliable, is always steady, always delivers on his promises? And, maybe we've been enticed by the culture around us that's been, hyping up other things for us to chase after. And, we're more excited about, fill in the blank, the newest TV show or the newest technology or whatever, money's going to buy us. And so our passion for Jesus has soured. The life of Jesus is an exciting life. Now there's challenges. There's no question, but we're living with him and for him on a journey that we don't know where he's going to take us next. We don't know how he's going to use us next. And so instead of viewing that as a bore the life of Jesus should not be a boring life. We should never view it as a boring life. No, it is a thrilling, exciting life, but we've allowed culture and the enemy and negativity to sort of cloud our view of what it really looks like and means to follow Jesus. It's the right answer. It's the right choice. It's our best case scenario. And again, he's faithful and reliable. And so where has our enthusiasm gone for him? And so instead of reluctantly doing the right thing and choosing Jesus's way with this hesitation or boring mentality, let's embrace the wonderful life he has for us, and let's recognize all that he has done, what he did on the cross. He died for us. He rose again. He offers us eternal life, and he saves us from our sin. And so let's not take that for granted, and let's stop looking for someone else or something else to provide what only he can. So he's always the right choice. Let's seek him with no hesitation, but with confidence and excitement. And let's step to the draft board, so to speak. Say, yeah, this is what I'm taking. I'm taking Jesus every time. I don't care if other people think he's boring. I don't care if other people are hyping something else. The world's always hyping something. Hey, come do this, come do that. Hey, this is awesome. All that stuff, you can't count on it. It doesn't deliver. And maybe it delivers for a little while, but in the long run, you can't count on the things of this world. We can always count on Jesus. And so in Hebrews, it says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. So that's who we want to cling to. That's who we want to place our hope and faith in. And then in Romans, it says, never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. So let's do it with passion. Let's do it with confidence. Let's do it with enthusiasm as we seek him, follow him, love him, and hold on to his truth and the life that he has for us. So let's let go of the reluctancy in life, and we'll go back to the fantasy conversation when it comes to reluctancy as well. And so Harrison, you actually came up with this topic, and so what have you experienced from a fantasy perspective when it comes to certain players that you either have reluctantly drafted in the past, or guys that you're reluctantly pursuing this year?
Yeah, when you look at guys in the past, you're always in the middle rounds of your draft, and there's a guy like Melvin Gordon last year, or James White in the years past for New England,
Brandon Cooks.
Brandon Cooks, where it's like, you know what, they're going to be solid, but do I take the shot on the rookie or just the guy who I know will be great? And most of the time, the guy who you know will be solid, even though you don't want to take them, always ends up outperforming that shot in the dark rookie or breakout player that you want to draft. And one guy for me this year that I'm finding that I don't really want to take him, but I know he's going to be good and have a solid season is Rashad Penny on Seattle.
Interesting.
Now, everyone wants to draft the rookie running back Kenneth Walker. He's actually going higher in ADP right now than Rashad Penny. But the Seattle coaching staff has come out and said that this starting running back job is Penny's to lose until he gets injured. I'm not really worried about Walker getting on the field and taking away any work from Penny because Walker's not a great pass catcher, which is the one way he could get on the field over Penny. And in the past, Seattle has used a bell cow running back. They have not run an offense where they use committee running back. And they showed this last year when Penny was the starter for the last 5 games of the season. He was on pace to break the single season rushing record. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen in 5 games, a small sample size, but you know that he's going to be solid at the beginning of the season. And he's a great guy who you can play in your flex. and will get you points while you wait for that rookie running back like a James Cook or a Kenneth Gainwell to gain momentum in their own offense and take their lead role.
Yeah, I would be very reluctant to draft Rashad Penny, but that reluctancy would probably lead to not drafting him. But one guy for me that I'm always reluctant to draft, like year in, year out, it's Dalvin Cook. And unfortunately for him, he's been stuck with sort of the injury prone label. But the reality is he's so productive. He's I mean, he really is consistent when you look at it year in, year out. You're going to get the yardage. We know he gets the volume. Now, there is a new head coach with O'Connell there in Minnesota, and we're kind of curious to see what this offense is going to look like. And I'm buying into it overall. I think he's going to get the most out of Kirk Cousins. I think Mike Zimmer, he just wasn't enough of an offensive guy, um, their previous head coach. And so uh, I'll reluctantly draft Dalvin Cook if I've got, the fourth, fifth, sixth pick somewhere in there this year. But the other part of me is I really like Alexander Madison, the backup. And so he's kind of my guy that I like to target more often. And so, when you have the handcuff, you sort of, you hate to admit this, but you root for the starter to get injured. You should say that. You root for your handcuff to get opportunity. We'll word it that way. We're not rooting for anybody to get injured, obviously. But that's where some of my reluctancy is with Dalvin Cook is sort of expecting the injuries. But then when you think about it, he's averaged 4.7 yards per carry. He's averaged 18 rushing attempts per game throughout his career. He averages 86 rushing yards per game when he's on the field. So there is the consistency. And in many ways, we should be confident in drafting Dalvin Cook because he does it year in, year out. Even and just expect maybe he'll miss a couple games. So, all right, who else you reluctant about this year?
So we talked about him a little bit earlier, but I'm pretty reluctant to draft Ezekiel Elliott, even though I know he's going to be great this year for fantasy. He's finished as a top 10 running back pretty much every year that he's played when he's played a full season. He was the RB7 last year, and everyone's forgetting about him because everyone wants Tony Pollard to take over. I know you want Tony Pollard to take over.
Yes.
He's explosive. He's great. He's a great player.
I love
But
the backup running back.
Barring injury, I just don't think that that's going to happen. The Cowboys are paying Zeke the highest running back salary in the NFL. They're not doing that to have him sit on the bench. And the team, like we said before, already says they want to make him more of a focal point in the offense this year. And even though Tony Pollard's great, he's not a guy who's going to come in and just take a big workload and be that bell cow back like the Cowboys like to use. He has below average weight for a running back. He's never had more than 14 carries in an NFL game. And the one game he played when Ezekiel Elliott was injured, he only had 12 carries. He wasn't getting that 25 carry workload like we see Alexander Madison get when Dalvin Cook is out. And, despite Pollard being thought as the quicker receiving back in the offense, Zeke has actually had 58% more targets than Pollard the last 2 years and is a much better pass blocker than Pollard. So Zeke is still the first down back. He's still the third down back and pass catching back. He's still the goal line back. And as much as we don't want to admit it, he is still the lead guy in Dallas and is going to be a top 10 running back probably once again, despite him going in the third rounds of drafts right now.
You can have him. I'll be passing. I will pass on him. Thank you very much. All right. So you're a Bears fan. And so this next guy I want to talk about, David Montgomery from the Bears. Now, he's still a young player. And last year, I was all in on the Khalil Herbert hype. I was even before he emerged. But so I'm still on that bandwagon, and I want to see, again, I'm the backup running back guy. I want to see Herbert play. However, if I'm sitting on the clock in the second round or third round and David Montgomery is available, there will be some reluctancy because, you look at he averages 3.9 yards per carry. So not great, but the reality is there should be volume for him. He has produced. He's played most of the games throughout his career. 44 of 49 games he's played, which is great. So there's a level of reliability there. There really aren't that many weapons in that Chicago offense. I'm going to talk about Cole Kmet in a little bit, and Darnell Mooney's fine, but they're going to rely on the running game. And so maybe they incorporate Herbert. Maybe they incorporate my former App State player, Darrington Evans, who they brought in, more of a pass catching guy. But the reality is, David Montgomery, if you can get him as an RB2, it's good value. It's like he can live up to that. And so he's overvalued because he's undervalued, I should say, because he's in Chicago. A lot of fantasy owners will overlook him. He's kind of boring. He's kind of one of those guys that we were describing, but I'll reluctantly take him if he's there. So any quick thoughts on that, and then we'll move to our last segment.
Yeah, David Montgomery is such an interesting player because he's not like an explosive running back. He's just
No.
very consistent, patient guy, but he's going to get so many targets. He's going to get so many, rushing attempts. Even though they're in a bad offense, he's still probably going to finish as a really, high-end running back, even though he's not going to finish as a top 5 guy. That's just not going to happen for him. But he's a really solid RB2, so I completely agree.
Yeah, it's a safe pick, I think. Overall, it's a safe pick. At least I like Herbert. Maybe he could take some carries away from him as the season goes on. But I still think you start off the year strong with David Montgomery. All right, so we're gonna take a look at we'll play a little game. We'll say draft them no matter what, at the right price, or under no circumstance. And so this is when a player is on the clock and we're making those decisions. Here's where we come out on these guys. And so Harrison, let me ask you about Mike Williams. I think I know where you stand on this, but what are your thoughts on him?
So Mike Williams is someone that I loved last year. I took him in literally every single fantasy league that I was in because I thought he was going to break out. And he did. He posted a career year with a career high in targets, receptions, and yards, and finished as the wide receiver 12 in fantasy last year, despite his inconsistency during the season of having 30 points one week and then 3 points the next week. But however, Mike Williams, was a really good, just solid NFL wide receiver. He was 5th overall in route wins last year, and the Chargers rewarded his breakout by giving him a 3-year, $60 million contract. So they clearly don't think last year was a fluke, and I don't think last year was a fluke either. I think this season Mike Williams is going to, break out even more and overtake Keenan Allen as the wide receiver to have in this Chargers offense. Despite catching 9 touchdowns last year, Williams will catch even more this season, surprisingly. He was 8th in the NFL in red zone targets last year, but only finished with 5 red zone touchdowns. Comparably, guys with similar skill sets to him, like Mike Evans and DK Metcalf, both had 3 less red zone targets than Williams, but scored 10 and 9 touchdowns, respectively, with those targets. So I think he's going to have positive touchdown increases this year. Justin Herbert really trusts him more than anyone else in this offense, I think. In week 17 last year, with the playoffs on the line, Herbert targeted Williams 17 times, which was 5th most of any player in a single game last year. And Herbert just doesn't throw him easy completions with those 17 targets. His yards per reception mark in that game was way above anyone else who was ahead of him on that list that got more targets. So I think you have to draft Mike Williams no matter what. He is going to be a surefire top 10 wide receiver this year in fantasy.
All right. I got to say, you've convinced me on Mike Williams. I have been out on him over the years, and I'm starting to come around. I'm all in on the Chargers, so I'm willing to take Chargers players kind of no matter what. All right. The guy for me this year that I want to get in every draft is A.J. Dillon. And again, so it was a guy last year. So sometimes we if we're in on a guy for 1 year, it continues on until I guess until you give up on the guy or they finally arrive. And so Dillon showed the glimpses last year. He had a couple big games when Aaron Jones was out, and we saw what he's capable of doing. But I just checked the latest ADP. He's going like 56. Man, I love that value. To me, AJ Dillon can be a very reliable running back too, and you can draft him really as a running back 3 flex guy. And I just think, one, the Packers are going to run the ball more often, and I think they're going to like the reliability and consistency of Dillon. I mean, he averages 4.3 yards a carry last season, and again, the ability to get into the end zone. And when it starts getting cold later in the season, he's a guy that can win your leagues. I really believe that. So I'm getting him no matter what. All right. How about a player that you're willing to draft at the right price? Who's somebody that jumps out to you at the right price?
So one guy that jumps out to me at the right price is Darren Waller, and he's been great for fantasy in the past. I took him in the last round of my fantasy draft, the year where he had his breakout season. Everyone called me crazy for having him as my tight end one. But this year, even though he's going to have a really solid season, I think he's going to be more touchdown dependent in the past because he's not going to get the same target numbers that he did with, now Devontae Adams in the offense and Hunter Renfrow taking a step forward. So I think he's going to be more of a volatile week to week tight end. But he's still going to be very good season long. So I would love to take Waller maybe in like the 5th round after I get, my running backs and wide receivers. And then also take Derek Carr late as a stack. So that way, when the weeks when Waller isn't as involved, you still get the touchdowns from Derek Carr throwing them to Devontae Adams or Renfrow. But then when Waller's the focal point and he has that huge breakout game, which we all know that he can have, you win your week because you get double the points from Carr and Waller being in your starting lineup.
All right. So a little tease for next week's show. We'll do our draft strategy special. And you just mentioned a philosophy of the stack. I'm anti-stack. So that a little tease. So we can debate that next week. All right. We're going to go through a few more players pretty quickly here. And we can give you a little bit more of the recap on our website, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. And so we got a lot of information about these different players and kind of where we come out on these guys. And so as far as for me, another guy that I'm really, I want to draft no matter what, Cole Kmet. And I just love that he's still under the radar and he's in that kind of tight end 10 range, but I think he can be a tight end like 6. So you can get him in the 10th round or after. And so I'm going to go after him. I think Justin Fields will rely on him. I think he'll be a reliable, tight end, which he showed last year. We saw his emergence, and I think only diehard fantasy owners really took notice. This always happens in fantasy. It's like you see the glimpses, and then the diehards realize it, but the average fantasy owners just kind of wrapped up in their own team, kind of toward the end of the season. They don't really understand kind of all that's going on. And then this year, Komet's going to burst out, and then everybody will know about him. That's my guess. Him and AJ Dillon, those are the guys for me. I was a little bit early last year, but I'm still on the bandwagon for both those guys. And then the other one for me, as far as at the right price, Brandon Ayuk. So right now his value is he goes 100 ADP, but people are ranking him at 85. So he's a talented player with Trey Lance. Everybody talks about Deebo Samuel, as they should. But don't forget Brandon Ayuk. He got off to a slow start last year, finished strong. And then I like Chase Edmonds at the right price as a good value guy. If I can get him as kind of my 3rd running back flex guy, he won't be awesome every week, but he'll have some really nice games, catch a lot of balls out of the backfield. So run through a couple names for you, Harrison.
Yeah, so one more guy that I want to draft no matter what is Ramondre Stevenson on the Patriots. Now, you and I were both in on Damian Harris last year, but Stevenson really became the guy as the season went on. From week 10 on, it was a true split backfield between the two of them, and Stevenson averaged 13 carries to Harris's 10 carries. And now in training camps, there's reports that Stevenson is being used as the Patriots' 3rd down receiving back, which last year we saw Brandon Bolden and James White combined to have over 50 receptions in that role. Damian Harris is also on a contract year, and there's been no talks to re-sign him. So I think Stevenson could get the receiving work, is going to be splitting carries early on, and could just become the overall lead back in this offense by the end of the season over Damian Harris and the guy to have in New England. And then one guy who I am not drafting under any circumstances is Robert Woods. Everyone hopes that Robert Woods can be this really good wide receiver 2 or even the wide receiver 1 for the Tennessee Titans because of what he's done in the past. However, he tore his ACL in November last year and will be extremely lucky to even begin the season, on the field. And history is not kind to wide receivers who tear their ACL. Nearly 30% of receivers who tear their ACL never step on the field again. And for
Wow.
the ones who do, when they return, their receptions per game decreased by 32% and their yards per reception dropped by 22%. In addition, Woods is also turning 30 years old this year, which may not seem like a big deal. But last year, there was not a single receiver in the NFL over 30 to have more than 900 receiving yards. And the guy who led the NFL in receiving yards over 30 was A.J. Green. I don't know how much fantasy owners were trusting A.J. Green in their lineups week to week. So I really just do not see a world where Robert Woods is super productive this year. I hate to say it because he's been such a great player. And then they also drafted a lot of wide receivers in the draft, including Kyle Phillips, a slot receiver out of UCLA in the middle rounds, who, like Woods, is a great route runner, great blocker, could take that role from him in the slot. And I just don't really think Woods is going to be as involved in this offense as people thought when the trade first happened.
Over the next couple of weeks, we'll try to fit it in to one of the episodes. We'll talk about teams that we're avoiding or teams that we're targeting. So like the Chargers, I'm targeting the Chargers. I want the Chargers. The team I'm avoiding, the Titans. Get them out. Get them out. I don't want them. I don't want any Titans players. And this is the number one team last year in the AFC, and I'm selling them. So I'm jumping off. I'm jumping off the bandwagon, and so Robert Woods would be included in that. All right, so we'll wrap up with this. Two guys that I'm not drafting under any circumstance. Kyler Murray. I want to avoid that firestorm. Does he watch film? Does he not watch film? Is he going to watch film? Who's going to keep an eye on him? Does he have a babysitter? Does he not have a babysitter? I don't know. Thank you. He cost me last year. My worst team last year had Kyler Murray. So no, thank you. And then I joked about Mike Gesicki earlier. To me, he's the guy every summer that like just gets so hyped, and he was okay last year. But with all the weapons Miami has, no thank you. Mike Gesicki, they still say he's tight end 13. His ADP is 110. Ooh, even that seems too early for me. So no thank you. He will not be on any of my teams this year, I promise. So good stuff out of Harrison. Be sure to check out all of our content, the faith content, the fantasy and faith content on our website, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Become a member today. If you enjoy this podcast, if you listen to this podcast, please become a member today. Get access to all of our content throughout the season. And we want to help you draft well, manage well, and find meaning and purpose throughout the fantasy season. So thanks to Harrison. Thanks to intern Landon for all of his great research today. He's still working hard. He thinks we're still going. He's still writing. He's giving me all sorts of content. I love it. Keep working hard, Landon. We appreciate you. And thanks to everybody for listening today. I'm Bryce. I'm a sports fan who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well. And I hope you'll join me as we live life as fantasy owners and sports fans who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day, and let's not be reluctant to follow Jesus. Let's be enthusiastic. Let's embrace him and all that he is and who he is. He's faithful. He's reliable. He loves us. He gives us grace and mercy every single day. Let's rest in him and praise him, worship him, seek him, love him with all we've got. So praise God. We love him. That's why we do this show. It's fun talking fantasy, but more importantly, let's continue to point one another toward Jesus. So have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast presented by Medi-Share.